Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're looking at a discussion from the Santa Fe Trail Chargers Board of Education. This was back on April 9th, 2025.
Yeah, and the main topic was how they plan to involve the community in some pretty big potential changes district reconfiguration.
Exactly. And just so you know, our information comes straight from the YouTube transcript excerpts of that meeting.
Right. And our mission here isn't just to read you the minutes. We want to really unpack the board's initial thinking on community engagement and look at the different ways they were considering bringing people into the loop, especially with something this significant possibly coming down the pike.
Definitely. If you're a parent in the district, or maybe you pay taxes locally, or even if you're just interested in how these big community decisions get made.
Which often involves schools and, well, money.
Yes, always the money. Then this is for you. Okay, so let's get into it. The board pretty much started by saying, look, we have to get the community involved if we're thinking about reconfiguration.
Yeah, that was clear, especially if it might lead to asking for a bond to pay for it all. Yeah. You can't really push that through without public buy-in.
Makes sense. So this need for community engagement, it wasn't just a side note.
Not at all. It felt like a central thread through the whole discussion. And right away, they talked about maybe forming a steering committee.
Okay, the steering committee to kind of guide the process.
That seemed to be the idea. It shows they understand that major changes like this need dedicated input from the community itself, not just asking for opinions after the fact.
Right. Build it in from the start. Did they have ideas on who would be on this committee?
They did. They threw out some initial numbers. The suggestion was aiming for pretty broad representation.
Like how broad?
Well, 5 people from each of the main communities, Carbondale, Scranton, and Overbrook.
Okay.
Then maybe 2 or 3 staff members from each school, plus an administrator from each school.
Wow, that's quite a few people already.
And a board representative from each town as well. So yeah, a fairly large group.
That definitely covers a lot of bases.
It does. It shows they're thinking about getting different viewpoints.
Yeah.
But then an interesting point came up about the board's own involvement.
How so?
Well, they debated, should the entire board sit in on this committee? Because if they did, every single committee meeting would technically have to be a formal public board meeting with all the rules that go with that.
Logistically complicated.
Right. Or the alternative was just having those designated board reps, one from each town, who would then report back to the full board later.
Okay, that sounds maybe more practical. It highlights that tension between wanting everyone involved and, well, actually getting things done efficiently.
Exactly. Balancing participation with procedure.
So, okay, you need people for this committee. How do you find them? What was the plan there?
The first idea was pretty standard. Put out an online interest form, make it public, anyone can sign up.
Makes sense. Cast a wide net.
Yeah, it's a common way to start.
Yeah.
But then someone had what I thought was a pretty sharp idea. They suggested proactively reaching out to the people who actually showed up to the last special meeting about this.
Tap into the people already engaged. Smart.
Yeah, it shows they're already invested enough to give up their time, right? So maybe they'd be good candidates.
Good point. What about people who watched online? Did that come up?
It did. There was a bit of discussion there, maybe leaning towards those who came in person. But they also recognized, they needed to somehow capture interest from the virtual attendees, too.
So considering different ways people participate now.
Right, which is important. Now, here's where, for me, it got particularly interesting. There seemed to be some, let's say, differing views among the board members about what this steering committee's main job should actually be.
Oh, not just steer.
Well, yes, but how? You see, one perspective was that the committee should mainly be about gathering feedback. Broad feedback.
Like, what do people generally think about the big ideas? One campus versus 2, maybe?
Exactly. Just get a feel for the community's gut reaction to the basic concepts.
Okay, straightforward enough. What was the other view?
The other perspective felt a bit more strategic, maybe. The idea was, well, maybe the board should first figure out which way they're leaning. Right. Say they kind of prefer the 2-campus idea. Then the thinking goes, maybe you find committee members who seem likely to support that idea, and they can help, champion it in the community.
Okay. So less about pure information gathering and potentially more about building momentum for a specific path.
That's how it sounded, yeah. It raises that fundamental question about community engagement, doesn't it? Is the goal to genuinely explore all options with an open mind, using community input to decide? Or is it more about getting support for a direction you already think is best?
Yeah, that's a really different approach.
And someone voiced a concern like, if we just ask for general opinions, we might just end up back where we started with no clear direction forward.
Stuck in analysis paralysis, kind of?
Great. That's the risk. But the risk of the other approach is, well, does the community feel like their input is genuinely wanted? Or are they just being recruited to support a decision that's already kind of been made?
That's a fine line to walk.
It really is. And actually, someone suggested maybe the committee's role could change over time.
How so?
Like maybe it starts out gathering that broad feedback. Then, once the board makes a choice on the general direction, the committee shifts gears and helps focus on and maybe promote that specific plan.
Okay, so an evolving role, trying to be pragmatic, perhaps.
Seems like it. It reflects that constant balancing act, wanting input, needing to make decisions, wanting efficiency. It's tough.
Definitely. Now, amidst all this talk about the committee, there was another thread, waiting for more information.
Yes, this was crucial. Before really kicking off the committee or maybe even going wide to the public, several board members said, hang on, we need more answers first.
Answers from who?
Primarily from HTK architects.
The architects they're working with, what kind of answers?
Really fundamental stuff. Like if we're talking 2 campuses, is there actually enough space? Where would additions physically go? What's the long-term plan? The actual steps involved in reconfiguration.
Yeah, you can't really discuss options without knowing the basics.
Exactly. The feeling was, it's premature, maybe even confusing, to ask the community to weigh in on, say, a 2-campus model if you don't even know if it's physically possible or where things might be built.
That makes perfect sense. Get the facts straight first.
Get those architectural realities on the table. It seems like a logical prerequisite.
And it wasn't just HTK, right? They also mentioned their tax consultants, Piper Sandler.
Correct. The plan there is to bring Piper Sandler in to talk about the money side.
The financial implications.
Right. What would different reconfiguration scenarios cost? What are the options for bonds? What would the impact be on taxpayers?
Crucial information for any decision.
Absolutely. And Piper Sandler would also likely advise on campaign considerations if a bond becomes necessary. How do you talk about the finances? What questions should the steering committee be ready for?
Okay. So that financial piece is expected to help the board narrow things down, too. Like maybe one option is just much more affordable than another.
That seems to be the expectation. Understanding the costs associated with 1 campus versus 2, for example, will be a huge factor in their decision-making.
Okay, so given they need this info first, what's the rough timeline looking like for actually getting the steering committee going?
Well, the thinking seemed to be, let's start the background work for the committee, like getting that interest form ready, maybe after the school year wraps up.
So over the summer, maybe?
Potentially. The goal mentioned was to try and have a list of people who are interested ready to show the board by their June meeting.
Okay.
And then perhaps the committee could actually start meeting and doing its work sometime after that.
And how are they planning to let people know about this interest form?
They listed several channels. The district website, obviously, newsletters, the district's Facebook page.
Standard stuff?
Yeah, and also putting it out on community Facebook pages and possibly even the local newspaper, trying to get the word out widely.
Good. And they mentioned organizing the interested people.
Yes, there was a really practical suggestion to categorize people who sign up.
Oh.
By which community they're from, Carbondale, Scranton, Overbrook, to make sure there's geographic balance.
Makes sense.
And maybe also by their connection, like are they a parent, a business owner, just a community member, part of a local group?
Trying to ensure a real mix of perspectives on the committee. That sounds like a good approach.
Yeah, aiming for that diverse representation we talked about earlier.
Okay, so back to needing that key info from the architects and the finance folks.
Yeah.
Did they set a date to get that?
They did. They needed to coordinate with HTK and Piper Sandler. HTK gave them a bunch of possible dates in late April and May, and the board looked at their own calendars. Considered things like professional development days, school events like state track, softball, junior high league track, golf, baseball. Lots of potential conflicts.
Always tricky scheduling things in May.
Tell me about it. But they landed on a date. They decided to hold a special board meeting specifically for this.
When is it?
It's scheduled for Monday, May 5th at 6:00 p.m.
Okay, May 5th.
Yeah, planned for about 2 hours. And the specific goal is to have people from both HTK Architects and Piper Sandler there to present that foundational information the board needs.
Excellent. So that meeting on May 5th sounds like it's going to be really pivotal.
It really does. It should give the board the grounding they need before moving forward with broader community engagement.
Okay, so let's try and summarize where things stand. The Santa Fe Trail Board is clearly in the very early planning stages for involving the community on this whole reconfiguration idea.
Definitely early stages. They're batting around ideas for a steering committee, who should be on it, what exactly it should do. But they've also recognized, quite rightly, that they need to get some homework done first. They need solid answers from their architects and financial advisors.
Before they really launch into asking the public to weigh in.
Exactly. It shows they're trying to be methodical, balancing that desire for community input with a need for practical, factual information.
And it's clear it's a complex process. There are different ideas, even within the board, about the best way to engage people.
Yeah, that tension between gathering broad feedback versus building support for a specific vision was quite evident. It's a common challenge in these situations.
So something for you, our listener, to think about. When your community is facing big choices like this, how do you think public involvement should work?
Yeah, what's the ideal balance? How much weight should be given to general community feeling versus the detailed analysis from, hired experts or the elected officials themselves?
It's definitely not a simple question. Lots to consider there.
Indeed.
Well, thanks for diving deep with us into this initial discussion.
My pleasure. Always interesting to see these processes unfold.